name is Leah. I'm a senior here at Robert Morris. My major is hospitality and tourism management. So before I took this course by Dr. Edward Karshner, it was called Reading Literature. It's a course on classics and counter-tradition stories. I had no interest in the topic at all. However, when we started writing these papers, I discovered that I really had a strong knack for associating philosophical and biblical time-place stories to modern-day tales such as Cinderella and A Christmas Story, and you'll learn why I titled it that as I go on through the paper. So basically, what I'm going to go over is I'm going to read through the paper, and you'll see how I tied fairy tale stories to the Navajo creation stories. And throughout my presentation, I'll kind of give side notes as to the meanings of some of the terms that I've used in the Navajo phrases. Unfortunately, Dr. Karshner could not be here to back me up with some of the sort of taboo terms that I might say, but I will do my best to clarify them forward. So, when we are making decisions through our everyday lives, we're often faced with strange behaviors. Often we see in the news violence and crime, disguising shame with sin. Characters that I've related these stories to, Ebenezer Scrooge and Cinderella, may sound silly to you, but I have evidence that supports the case that the wicked stepsisters do relate to Joseph in the story that I wrote and more about. Also, moments of exigency lead to sinful actions, and it is how we manage sin that determines our overall character. The body is the temple of the soul. The human body and our conscience can often be associated with two opposing forces, the angel and the devil. It is often portrayed in make-believe stories, fairy tales, and exaggerated films. However, the metaphorical idea of an angel resting on one shoulder while a devil stands on the other holds true in many phases and aspects of life. The philosophical idea of ontology is very complex, but I will simplify it for the time we have for this presentation. By definition, means the branch of metaphysics dealing with the nature of being. Morality, which is the differentiation of intentions and decisions and actions between those that are good or right and those that are bad and wrong, is displayed in traditional creation stories and can be associated with the angel, while the devil, on the other hand, is the subject of immoral inclination that can be associated with devious actions displayed in stories and which lead to egotistical actions, thus causing one to ignore the thoughts and feelings of others to reach their goals. Although we cannot escape the devil and the evil thoughts that embark in our minds, we can, however, find a balance to break free from evil actions. Finding this coincidence of opposites, or as Navajo stories refer to it as synthesis, can be reached much easier if one makes the best of a situation, has faith in oneself, and believes in others around them. I feel that the answer to the question of ontology, which is what exists, is much more complex than just the simple answer of we humans exist on Earth. Although creation stories take place in the distant past when society had yet to fully develop, and stories were told traditionally to teach lessons of morality, they can be closely related to classic well-known stories that still live on today, such as A Christmas Carol, which contains many relatable characters and themes that surprisingly relate to traditional and non-traditional creation stories. And here's a novel that we had read in his class called The Beginning of Wisdom by Leon R. Cass. His story titled Joseph's Descent into Egypt tells of a fabulous rags-to-riches Egyptian career. Joseph is at first a slave in the Potiphar's house and gradually rises to become chief overseer. The story depicts the progress Joseph makes and how he fails to realize the inner voice, which is the Lord, guiding the way for him and bringing him the skill he needed to progress in the household. Cass describes Joseph's entrance into Egypt as a descent because Joseph is taken in as a slave to an Egyptian man referred to as his master. However, the Lord was with Joseph, Cass writes, and as a result, he rises and prospers. So this part in the story, I feel, illustrates traditional ontology, which is the theory of the true nature of being and the philosophical idea of existence. According to traditional ontology, existence is a transformation process, and there is no way of extinguishing vitality and divine dignity. There's no escaping it, and it is essential that we find the balance of true reality and self-awareness. Joseph is finding the balance between what is true, which is hypostasis, while finding a new entity and a way to break free from slavery, in this case, synthesis. In the Genesis stories, there is a tendency of wanting to overstate the idea of death and surrendering the ability to make decisions for oneself. Cass writes of God placing an expiration date on us. However, one should never ignore the phases of ontology. You may be wondering how on earth death and stories of finding oneself and the angel and the devil could ever relate to Cinderella. However, the story of Joseph being brought to Egypt is not the average Cinderella story one may be used to hearing. The story involves guilt, temptation, evil, and monstrous behavior. However, I feel that Cinderella's evil stepsisters from the classic tale can resemble Joseph's brother in the story of Genesis, thus making the fairy tales somewhat of a metaphor for Joseph's story. For example, the text describes Joseph seeking his brothers and finding them in Dothan. Joseph's brothers were aware of his ambitious and triumphant dreams, calling him the dream master, and they plotted to kill him as a result of their jealous rage. The story of Cinderella wasn't quite as intense. They never had any intentions of killing her. However, they did have a sense of jealousy that I feel everyone can relate to at some point in life. Actually, every day, whether we know it or not, we do have feelings of jealous rage towards an individual. It could even be a close friend. These feelings of jealousy and temptation can relate to the classic story of the wicked stepsisters discovering that Cinderella wished to attend the royal ball with hopes of meeting the handsome prince. Much like Joseph's brothers, the stepsisters still keep in mind she is their sister, and they must refrain from murdering their own blood. The brothers feel shame because they have not received the attention and favoritism that Joseph had received from their father Jacob. Immoral inclination is displayed in the brothers' actions as they blame their brother and his success for their jealous shame. In Cinderella, the representation of Joseph's father, I feel, would be the handsome prince. Jacob and the prince are symbolic for ceremony and divine dignity because the characters strive to gain their attention, and they are forces that drive their ultimate decision-making. So this is basically just all about jealous rage and how everyone in today's society still feels these emotions, and they often lead to bad decisions. In the story of Joseph, he accomplished many things that his brothers did not. He was favorited by their father Jacob, so the brothers plotted to kill him, and they did out of jealous rage because they overall wished that they could be him. So that was their only solution. So in the story, Joseph looks to the Lord for strength, guidance, and inspiration when he is made a slave to his master. He trusts in the Lord and feels comfortable knowing that he is with him through this difficult time. The Lord that Joseph looks to for strength, I feel, can be represented in the Cinderella tale as the fairy godmother. I don't have a picture of her, but we can all imagine the spiritual figure. Everyone looks to a spiritual being, a god, however you interpret it, and this is how she felt. In Genesis, Joseph's dream offends his brother because they feel that he is arrogant and braggadocious about his skill and favoritism from his father. A moment of exigency is displayed as the brothers feel offended by his telling of the dream and they plot to kill him. The dream relating to the Cinderella story can be represented by Cinderella's desire to dance with the prince at the royal ball. The stepsisters plot to hurt Cinderella in an effort to have the prince to themselves. Now I'm going to move forward to the comparison of a Christmas story with the creation stories, or Christmas Carol, I'm sorry. Joseph's ontology and how he manages sin can also relate to Charles Dickens' 1843 classic novel, A Christmas Carol. Ebenezer Scrooge, the focal character, is an angry elderly man living his life for only himself with not a care in the world of others around him. Dickens refers to Scrooge as a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. He despises the Christmas season and lacks joy and happiness that people of his town obtain. The monstrous man overworks his employees, rejects holiday party invitations, and turns away charitable workers seeking donations for the poor. So in the story, we learn of the shame that Scrooge hides behind in the struggle of finding his ideal self. The Navajo stories, creation stories, tell of how the people dealt with sin, and sometimes they disguised shame for sin. So when they were feeling bad about themselves, everyone else was sort of feeling neglected. They pushed everyone aside, just as people today handle their anger. We see it every day on television. This classic story relates to the idea of sin and how ontology can alter sinful acts. He made a choice to hate Christmas and alienate himself from others around him who enjoyed the joy that the holiday season brings. He faces a struggle between his potential and ideal self, and God, according to Cass, represents our idealized self and potential to do the right thing. Like Joseph's brothers and Cinderella's sisters, Scrooge takes out his negativity on others who have not done him any wrong, just as Cass describes the moral inclination blaming God for our troubles. The ghost of his past forced Scrooge to question his morals, actions, and attitudes by showing him flashbacks of his childhood, past holidays, and present as we begin to see the mistakes he has made and shame he has hidden subconsciously. Questions about oneself necessarily summon one to reflect, to look back upon oneself and discover oneself as a being that thinks. In conclusion, this is how I feel. This is how I feel relates to the journey of self-discovery from the two folk tales.